Hello, everybody. This is Timothy Gager, and welcome to Virtual Thursday's Dire Literary Series. Where in April we're doing it for Natural Poetry Month, 3 weeks in a row. And also, I've got various promises to make to people, and one is I won't be try not to pat my head or stroke my beard the entire interview like I've been noticed myself to do, but that's just me being overly self-aware. But my guest, and our guest tonight, is a wonderful poet and writer. It's Millicent Borges Accardi, and let me see if I can get to her bio. And welcome. Here you are. Millicent Borges Accardi, a Portuguese-American writer, is the author of 5 poetry collections. She's had recent work in the Paris Review, James Dickey Review, APR, and Glass. Among her writing awards are fellowships for the National Endowment for the Arts, Fulbright, CantoMundo, Penn, California Arts Council, and Barbara Deming Foundation. She lives in Topanga Canyon, where she serves as a mentor in the Adroit and AWP Mentor to Mentor summer programs, and is a Rhino Editorial Fellow for 2026. Millicent holds degrees in English and writing from CSULB and the University of Southern California, a wonderful school. And well, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to turn it over, like we do. We'll turn it over to you, and I'll get to hear your wonderful poems, and then we'll do a Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I'm having my own technical, just to make sure I can see it. I thought I would start out with my poem that was in the Paris Review, which was a sort of a dream for me, and I submitted it in November, and it appeared in the December-January issue. It was taken from the time when I was working doing a bunch of oil refineries, doing technical writing, software testing, and training for different refineries. Good tank farms. They are like women because you can sleep near them, with them, in your truck, close to tank 10 when you are hungover. They are like men because they are isolated, yet stand in the rain, surrounded by mounds of dirt and asphalt to catch spillover. You can be fired for walking on the dikes. They have floating roofs and a stairway up the side, like desert lizards. They are jungle gods of the refinery. Because they weather oil spills and bad tank level readings, they lead the lay into battle and hide bar fights from the foreman. Never let fuel go to flare or move you over to a bad order in the southwest corner. The good tank farms are at gate 7 and the slab. They don't have proportional bands to protect the level controller or show how far you can go before the set point kicks in. They are good tank farms because they can switch contents to one another at will and receive new contents as transfer. Good tank farms serve as storage and beacons, the foundation, the low-lying dirt at the end of Babbackin Way. In wisdom, they are immovable, steadfastly residing where you last found them, like Easter Island stone men. They are strong and dense. Touch their sides. They are huge but accessible, tangible, dramatic, sedentary, committed to purpose. From a Nomex blue sky, looking out over a tank farm, they appear as a board with checkers, the squat cylindrical shapes shoulder to shoulder, apart from each other. They are good tank farms. They hate change, bold over the ends of the earth just to avoid being cracked open. They like sitting still for centuries, like immovable ocean liners, like the hulls of long ago ships that don't float or leave ever. The next one is from a black and white photograph, Portrait of a Girl, 1942. I am the mirror for one who speaks. These fresh gaps are wind in the linden trees, cotton flowers of life. A mirror is not much for all of us, but if we listened for reflection, the clear twin face of a groan behind the looking glass, We hear the cat's hair sounds of all people grumbling in the same manner about the air, the food, the earth, the sidewalk. I am the mirror for all the world silent, and the ones who slip through without drawing blood, whose suicides number nothing next to vast doors too tall to reach heaven, locked forever, whose breaking takes generations sometimes, dull copper paint on the back of a lake. I am the mirror for one who is trembling like a child who has noticed too much, eyes hard olive pits. I think about how life cracks when the vanity glass overturns our hands. Sharp pints in bars, uneven edges of ale, crisp indignities of foam. I am the mirror for all who choose not to speak. I crack in the dark, I shine in the snow. This is from a manuscript I'm working on that's sort of loosely based on the Psalms. In the way that sinners take. In the way that sinners take, we struggle against the swear and the curse, the open-handed slap across the face that the inevitable wall of being alone among your fears gives you. Safety, briefly, certainly not sanity or even a right to bear sweet sorrow, comfort. In the way that sinners take us on a journey, dragged into their doubt and the unwillingness of them to let us in, to swear us to the truth they deny, we carry on, packed against what is chaff and what is wheat, sorting through a season of what we need to believe and what we desire for the moment. What can we do with the time we have fooled here? And who can benefit most in the creation we have been easily unsinging, all to ourselves, unsinging under our breath, when we start to consider what it all means to have a divine pattern or a source document in which to consult when the tough lasts through many times of choosing which weakness we want so badly to adopt and trounce upon, to rejoice, not in fear, but with a new willingness to look beyond the horizon and into just figuring out the next of our many steps as we cut down the brambles and sort through our own discontent and doubt while embracing coolly the ambition we had when jealousy first started to speak our infinite tongue. This one is about sort of what I grew up with. I grew up in a Portuguese family and everything was recycled, and I grew up in a generational household with my grandparents and my parents, and we recycled and took care of everything. And this is sort of a poem about the life cycle of a shirt. The graphics of home were broken by the Great Depression, the textile mills and the golf ball factories. We came from the Azores and the mainland in Canada, settling in Hawaii and New Bedford and San Pedro. The original navigators. No one was documented. Here was what I learned at home through the life cycle of a shirt. It arrived from Sears in the mail, sent as a hand-me-down from Fall River, carefully washed and ironed and pressed into a tomato box that had been repurposed and wrapped in brown paper and smelling of stale cigarettes. That shirt was worn and washed and used many times, as if it had been new. When they frayed, the elbows were mended, and torn pockets were reconnected with thick carpet maker's thread. When the sleeves were too worn to restore, they were scissored off to make short sleeves. And then the new ends were folded and hemmed until no more. And then there was the time when the sleeves were cut off entirely to create a summer top or a costume for playtime, sleeveless, perhaps a vest for a pirate or a nurse. When outgrown and too worn for even that, the placket of buttons was removed in one straight, hard cut along the body of the shirt front, through and through. The buttons were pulled off by hand for storage in an old cookie tin, the cloth cut in small, usable pieces for mending, for doll clothes, for whatever was left. The rest torn into jagged rags for cleaning, and if the fabric was soft, used for Saturday's dusting of the good furniture in the den. Whatever was left was sold by the pound, wrapped and rolled into giant cloth balls, sold to the rag man, who made his rounds in the neighborhood, all oily and urgent and smiling, as if his soul were a miracle of naturalized birth. This is a man sleeps, the skies move. It happens that way, the sleep comes or not. We stay awake and the worry over a knock at the door at 5. When you are 5, your parents sit you down and smoke. They say, ah, it is a difficult thing. They say, you are our child, born in America, and we are trying. We filled out the paperwork. We hired an attorney. There was a problem with an entry date. Our visa was late, but we did everything we could. There was a problem. There was a problem, you understand? That is what it is. We moved, and we're a day late in reporting our new address. So we are trying. There is the sky. We save money in a jar that looks like water, the glass dense and broken, in the jar broken. At any rate, you are born in America. You are okay. Please be an adult. I know you are in kindergarten and want to pick roses for your teacher, but please listen and listen and listen and listen for a moment. Listen for your whole life. There may come a day when we might be away. Memorize your auntie's number. Take care. Watch the rain clouds. Do the dishes. Do not fall asleep without worry.
All right. What a great reading. I was really taken by the story the story narrative, how you tell a story in your poems, and that is a very, very good strength and very good poetry. So I've got some questions for you. I noticed that when I was doing my research, you identify yourself, first line of your bio, whatever time period it is, that you're a Portuguese-American writer. Now, how important is that, not just for you, but for others to point out or point toward when they're identifying themselves as writers?
I think for me it's been a process, and I've been sort of discovering my own identity, and it's very important, sort of as it is important to name the names, it's important for me to name the origin and where I came from. And as I started researching and looking more into my heritage and really learning a lot of what my parents and grandparents had sort of shoved aside, on sort of trying to like reclaim where I was and where I came from, and I felt more and more strongly about naming the name and having that identity attached to me and who I am. And so I could be like my own version of me, whatever that is. um, and I felt like I wanted to sort of claim that and look into it and explore it in a very real sense, including in my writing.
Do you write in multiple languages?
I don't. I'm struggling. I'm really bad at languages, so I'm struggling. My dad's first language was Azorian Portuguese, which was kind of he called it like a bastard language. It's more of a dialect, and so I knew very few things, just curse words and certain things. And so as I study, I'm lurking a little tiny bit with translation. I haven't really written anything in another language, but that's one of the things I like to explore as I'm learning and experiencing it. I'm sort of reading a lot of Portuguese writers and looking at those poems. I did a book called Through a Grady Landscape, and it was inspired by different contemporary Portuguese poets. So I feel like there's an interest for me in doing a little bit of translation, but I'm not a native speaker. So, but a lot of translators are not native speakers.
Uh, I read it. You had an interview that you were interviewed by the Paris Review, and in that interview, it was basically you were diagramming your own poem and deep diving into it. But you said the hardest thing is to start a poem, like the first pen stroke or the first through like clicks and clacks on a keyboard, and then you kind of get into a groove and you do it. So my question is, when you do start a poem, do you what comes to your mind first? The subject of the poem, a word or a group of words, or an image?
For me, it's a phrase. and it'll start with a phrase. It could be 3 words, it could be a little longer. And it's like in my head, it's a phrase. And if it keeps staying around, then it keeps building. And then the longer it sticks around, the more determined I am to kind of get it down on the paper because I don't want to lose it. So it usually, I work with images sometimes with photographs, but that's sort of more of a deliberate thing. When something just comes to me, it's always in a phrase. It could even be 1 word, but it's usually I start with a phrase that I heard from a dialogue or I saw on a sign or something like that I was reading, but it always starts with a very short phrase.
Yeah. I know that you worked with Guy Talese, and he advised you to incorporate your day job into your poems. Now, I'm going to use the word day job as kind of a metaphor to everyday life or everyday thoughts. So, do you continue to use that premise?
I, the funny thing was I did with the tank farms, and Gay Talese just he would inhabit industries like the porno industry. He got in there and wrote a novel about it, and I was taking a seminar at SC with him, and at the time I was working for a dog food company, and they make Science Diet, and
Oh,
I had
nice.
written, yeah, and I was doing ESL. I was teaching ESL English at the 5 a.m. class and before the shift started, and I was doing technical documentation, writing all their standard operating procedures. And I happened to mention that in a class, and he was like, "Why are you writing these other things? You should be writing about that." And I was like, "Dog food?" And I was, a grad student. I was all into like, "Oh, I want to write serious stuff," and he was like, "No, you should write about dog food and go and because you have this unique experience." And then I thought, yeah, yeah. And then I shoved it aside, and then I started writing sort of recently some sort of refinery poems. And as a fluke, I threw that in the tank farms in a batch of other poems. And I thought, because I always try to do that, like I'll throw in a new one and then a nice grouping. And that's the one they took. So maybe he was right.
That's really, really cool. What a great story. Yeah. I was wondering if you could throw dog foods into a poem that Billy Collins threw a dog into. That'd be a nice circle there. Um, you have a book called Quarantine Highway. Obviously, it was written during those days. And I'm thinking more about, and those days were really a whole different feeling, a whole different emotion. When those days lifted in humanity, we felt lighter. When the poems that you've written since Quarantine Highway, do they have that levity?
um, you and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand about how things were. For for us, the during um was really difficult. My husband's very ill, and we had our own fears about what was going on with that. And but it was also a time that some of the things that we found difficult to do were suddenly easy because a lot of the rest of the world was experiencing what we'd been going through, some of the difficulty in making connections and things with from a medical sense. There were a lot of like things opened up, more things were delivered home, more medical things were online, a lot of things that we thought were like you could just work at the site rather than working from home, a lot of things cleared up. And so I think we still use the phrase like, after the COVID, but I honestly, I'd love to say I feel lighter, but I don't. I think there's so much going on in the world, and it's going in a scary direction. And it's like we went from sort of one heavy thing holding over us to another heavy thing. And I didn't feel like suddenly I was writing poems about being outside and in the yard and things lightening up. It's just different because it's like I carry the burden and the heaviness of that into where we are now. Um, it seems kind of astonishing when things are bright and I go, oh wow, like when something works out, I'm just kind of astonished.
Yeah, like these days, it's kind of like you're asleep and you have a nightmare, and you wake up and you go right back into the nightmare.
Yeah. Like
Like,
in the before days, so many things happened kind of easily, and then like now it's like It's still heavy. It's still heavy.
I can't help but noticing the artwork, a piece of artwork in your background there, and also the art that you used on the covers of Enduring Eternity and Woman on a Shaky Bridge, those books that came out like 15, 16 years ago. Are you an artist, or tell me about your appreciation and love of, obviously you have appreciation and love of painting and prints. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
My husband's an artist, and he did the cover. So Injuring Eternity, he did the cover. He's does large scale figurative oil paintings. This is a smaller one, a portrait of Masako, one of our friends. And I'm sitting actually in a whole bunch of paintings. They're all stacked up here. They're all stacked up. Um, and they cover all the walls here. So I have an appreciation for the artwork, and we've been together for some 20 years. So I've been involved in the process, and he went to Vermont College and in the MFA program there. So I like the art world. I also do a lot of interviews with artists, visual artists. So
It's yeah, the covers are beautiful. He's a very talented artist, and um, also you've spoken a lot about. You've had a lot of influences in your writing. You said people that influence you, people that you've loved as writers. Tell me a little bit about the pros and cons about having literary influences.
well, I think the million dollar question is you want to be inspired or influenced by art or writing, but you don't want to copy it or take it over. You want to have your own new innovation to it. So I like to think of influence for me as a catalyst or a starting point. And the things that I admire in someone else, I like to create my own things and my own unique vision because everybody's different and everyone has their own thing. So the danger or the damage is falling so into a writer that you love or that you're interested in that influences you, and that writing or that style taking over. So I think that's why it's good to mix it up and have a bunch of different influences so they say, oh, her line breaks are from Ralph Angel, and her pauses are from, say, Linda Gregg, and her this from CD Wright or whatever. And then
Hmm.
it's kind of good if you have more of a mixture of who you are and your writing, and then you can kind of see a little bit of the influences.
Yeah, I like the key part of what you just said in terms of allowing them to take over, and that's a really important thing to know because I think especially young and newer writers, they're gonna be influenced and use those influences, and it's a nice little jump start for them. I mean, personally for me, like when I read Larry Brown's short stories, I was kind of like, I can do this. And that was a huge part. All right, tell me, you've got a book coming out. It's slightly delayed called Practical Love. Can you tell us a little bit about the poems in that book? I know it's gonna be available very, very soon.
Practical love poems are they're like everyday poems, and someone was reading some of them and they said these don't look like real love poems because they're not all lovey-dovey. They're just like everyday life, like you know basic things like making soup, walking down the street kind of thing. And so I wasn't sure what to call it, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And so then I was working on it, and then I thought, maybe I was really concentrating on like the titles, and then I thought maybe I should step back a little and just number them and have them be more of like a practical love poem number one, like love potion number nine or whatever. And so then they have their own sort of, the poem is its own thing rather than the title. So they kind of got into that. So these are sort of unconventional love poems.
All right. Well, Millicent, thank you so much for being with us and answering my questions. And you did such a great job. And I can't wait to pick up a copy of Practical Love when it comes out. And for those watching on the live stream, thanks for watching. Here's the artwork I was talking about. It's the covers for Millicent's husband. And here are Quarantine Highway, Through a Grainy Landscape, some books that we talked about during this interview. So check them out. I'm sure you can find if you know, if you're a reader and I got to tell you where to find a book, especially online, I shouldn't have to. But Millicent, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And I'm now going to cut off the live stream. If you'd like to come in and read in the open mic, just use the link and I will let you in.